A Boeing 767 cruises high above the Atlantic Ocean on its way to Egypt. 217 people are on board. Just half an hour after takeoff, disaster strikes. The pilot and co-pilot struggle desperately for control of their aircraft. The lives of all on board will depend on these two pilots and what they do about this dive towards the ocean.
We're not getting any oxygen. We have a terrain alarm. Aero Peru 603. We are in an emergency.
The John F. Kennedy International Airport outside New York City is one of the busiest airports in the world. In 1999, nearly 32 million passengers fly in and out. More than 340,000 flights take off and land. EgyptAir Flight 990 is destined to be one of the most controversial ever to leave this airport. The fate of this flight challenges the strength of an international friendship between two allies and uncovers a hidden mechanical flaw in one of the world's most popular airliners. The FBI will become involved.
We reviewed surveillance tapes to indicate whether or not anything unusual was loaded on that plane.
Investigators in two countries developed two different theories. Was this a tragic accident or a terrible crime? Just after 1 a.m. on October the 31st, 1999, the 217 people on board EgyptAir Flight 990 are waiting for takeoff. The flight's command captain is Captain Ahmed Al-Habashi. He's been with EgyptAir for 36 years. The command first officer is 36-year-old Adel Anwar. He switched duty with another co-pilot so he could return home in time for his wedding.
Soon be a married man.
Congratulations, Adel.
Thank you very much.
The airline's chief pilot for the Boeing 767, Captain Hatem Rushdie, joins them in the cockpit. At 1:20 in the morning, First Officer Adel Anwar is going through his takeoff clearance with air traffic control.
You fly the gateway climbing to 5,000.
Following gateway, clear for takeoff, runway 22 right, EgyptAir 990 heavy.
Cabin crew advised.
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. Cabin crew, takeoff position.
After an everyday blessing, the co-pilot assists the takeoff. For safety, both pilots push the throttles. On a flight of 10 hours, it's standard practice at EgyptAir to provide a relief crew to share the flying duties. The command crew takes off and lands. The relief crew flies the middle portion. Tonight, Captain Raouf Nur el-Din and First Officer Gamil el-Batuti are the relief crew. They will take over after the first 3 or 4 hours and fly the plane until shortly before Cairo.
V1, rotate. Positive rate of climb, both sides. 1,000.
EgyptAir 990 heavy, contact, departure now, 125.7.
1257, bye.
A large number of passengers are senior citizens from the United States, looking forward to touring the wonders of ancient Egypt.
My dad and Ginny were married in 1998 on October 23rd. And to celebrate their first anniversary, they decided to take a trip to Egypt.
Anita Child's parents are retired and on their way to Egypt as well.
They always had great time on these tours. They traveled frequently, and so it was a pleasure trip they were looking forward to. Seeing the Holy Land especially.
Maureen Sacratini and her brother John Simmermeyer enjoyed the fact that their parents loved to travel.
They had been particularly fond of a program known as Elder Hostel, and this particular vacation trip to visit the pyramids and the other historical sites in Egypt was an Elder Hostel trip.
There are 14 of EgyptAir's experienced crew operating the flight. There are also 33 Egyptian military officers and pilots on board, returning after training with the American Armed Forces. Gamil El-Batuti used to be an Egyptian Air Force flight instructor. He's now one of the oldest first officers at EgyptAir. He's so much older than the other co-pilots that out of respect they call him Captain. But some at EgyptAir think that Captain El-Batuti has been coasting too long on the favors of old friends. Just over 20 minutes after takeoff, El-Batuti is about to leave his seat. Former National Transportation Safety Board investigator Greg Phillips became an expert on the events of this flight.
The relief first officer, who would have been expected to come to the cockpit somewhere during the later part of the flight, halfway or wherever he was comfortable, wherever the normal change would have been, came into the cockpit about 20 minutes after takeoff.
Hello, Jimmy. How are you?
How are you, sir?
What's news?
I slept, I swear. Just wait. Let me tell you something. I'm not going to sleep at all. I might come sit for 2 hours
but
and then...
I slept. I slept.
You mean you're not going to get up? You will get up. Go and take some rest and come back.
You should have told me this. You should have told me this, Captain Gamal. You should have said, Adele...
Did I even see you?
I will work first. Just leave me a message.
The younger first officer seems surprised that El-Batuti wants to replace him so early in the flight.
And I'm not sleepy. So you take your time sleeping, and when you wake up, whenever you wake up, you come back, Captain, okay?
I'll come either way.
Captain.
Come and work the last few hours and that's all?
It's not like that. That's not the point. Look, if you want to sit here, there's no problem.
I'll come back to you. I'll go get something to eat and come back, all right?
Fine, fine. Look here. Why don't you go... Why don't they bring your dinner to you here, and then I'll go sleep, okay?
That's good.
Okay, with your permission, Captain.
And with that, El-Batuti leaves to get his meal.
Do you see how he does whatever he pleases?
Do you know why that is?
Captain Al-Habashi senses his first officer's resentment and tries to smooth over the situation.
Are you a youngster?
Anwar wonders if El-Batuti wants to take over because he may not want to work with Relief Captain Noor el-Din.
Doesn't he want to work with Raouf, or what?
It's possible, God knows. But look, you shouldn't get upset, right? By this prophet, he's just talking nonsense. That's it.
Everything's under control.
Okay, Chief.
Thanks a day.
First Officer Anwar concedes and is ready to hand over to El-Batuti. Normally, this is the most relaxed, easy part of a long flight for pilots and passengers alike. The highly automated aircraft systems will take care of the flying for several hours.
It's very unusual for an airplane flying over the Atlantic at nighttime to encounter any kind of difficulties. We normally expect accidents to happen in approach or landing or near airports, and very seldom do we get anything out over the ocean in the middle of the night.
Excuse me, Jimmy, while I take a quick trip to the toilet.
Go ahead, please.
Before it gets crowded, while they're still eating, I'll be back to you.
Before the captain returns, disaster will strike EgyptAir Flight 990. The fate of everyone on board will be in the hands of the co-pilot, the man who shouldn't be here in the first place. On a Boeing 767 bound for Cairo, EgyptAir's Flight 990 appears to be cruising smoothly over the Atlantic. The relief first officer Gamil El-Batuti is alone in the cockpit, while the captain has gone to the washroom. But then the plane dips, plunging down. The nose pitches down, creating zero-G, weightlessness, throughout the aircraft.
This airplane basically started at 1G, which is what we'd expect for level cruise flight. As you push the nose down, as if you would be cresting the top of a hill in a car at a high speed that drops away, you'd feel the airplane fall away from you. and you would start to feel a little light in the seat, and as the dive progressed, you would feel a little bit lighter yet.
I rely on God.
Whatever the first officer is intending, he says nothing except this phrase again and again. Captain Al-Habashi fights the disorientation of zero gravity, desperately trying to return to the cockpit. An American journalist living in France studied this flight extensively.
16 seconds after the dive began, when the airplane had gone into zero G and into negative G and was at an extreme angle, the captain somehow made his way back into the cockpit. How he did that physically, I will never know.
Warning signals indicate the dive is exceeding the maximum speed allowed for the plane, taking them to 99% of the speed of sound. This far past the plane's design limits, the stresses on the airframe are pulling it apart.
What's happening?
Captain Al-Habashi pulls back hard on his control column. Then he tries to use the engines to power their way out of the dive by pushing forward on the throttles, but he gets nothing.
What? You shut off the engines? Oh, God.
Desperate, the captain deploys the speed brakes, panels standing up from the wings, in an effort to slow the dive. The dive is slowing, back from the brink of the sound barrier. The dive goes on, but the nose is coming up. In just seconds, they go from 0 G to double the force of gravity. Captain Al-Habashi struggles to level the plane and pulls back hard on the control column. The 767's dive begins to slow.
Who would be? You shut off the engine, Paul!
In seconds, the engines stop and the power goes off, plunging the aircraft into darkness. Here, the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder stop. No one knows what happened in the plane during the next 2 minutes, but radar tracks its path. The plane is climbing again. Up from about 5,000 meters to over 7,500 meters as the aircraft structure is weakened by the stresses of abnormal speeds and maneuvers. Then the aircraft falls into another terrifying dive. Stressed beyond endurance, the left engine is ripped from the plane.
EgyptAir 990, New York Center. EgyptAir 990, if you copy...
At 1:52 a.m., Flight 990 disappears from radar screens, crashing into the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, some 100 kilometers off the American coast. Coast Guard search and rescue get a call at 2:15 a.m. A plane has disappeared, and Coast Guard vessels are called to the scene. The U.S. merchant marine training vessel King's Pointer is first to arrive.
Just as the day was dawning, we noticed oil in the water. And that was the first indication, so we turned the ship around back into the oil, and about as soon as we turned around, we started seeing debris rise up to the surface.
In Heliopolis, a Cairo suburb, Captain Al-Habashi's daughter can only guess what her father went through.
Can you imagine if you have a beloved one, a father, a daughter, or a brother, facing all the horrors of finding himself falling from 36,000 feet suddenly, trying to save his life, his colleagues' lives, the people, the passengers.
In a home in Maryland, a sleepy Sunday morning takes a tragic turn.
I had woken up for some reason at 5:30 in the morning, and we were flipping on the TV to check the weather, and we were deciding what mass we were going to be going to. It was Sunday. And immediately on CNN, they had Flight 990 missing, and I was in total shock. I ran down to my refrigerator where I had my parents' itinerary, and I ripped it off and just started sobbing uncontrollably. I was screaming. I didn't know what to do.
We located a significant debris field, and that we have concentrated our search efforts since then on about a 36 square mile of area, about 50 miles south of Nantucket.
At the end of October, the waters of the North Atlantic are so cold that normal life expectancy is about 5 to 6 hours. In Cairo, Relief Captain Raouf Nur el-Din's daughter May clung to hope for her father.
I was talking to myself, trying to convince myself that my father was not on this plane. And if he's on this plane, he will be safe, because my father was an Air Force pilot. He had a very good experience. And I thought maybe if the plane crashed, he will be able to, you know, to be in a safe place and to swim and to go to any land.
At the crash site, all that's left is pieces. Within hours, authorities know there's little hope for survivors.
We believe at this point that it is in everyone's best interest to no longer expect that we will find survivors in this case.
Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak reaches out to a stricken nation. This is the worst air crash in Egypt's history.
Really, I was shocked. It's a big tragedy for us. And I give my condolences to all the passengers, to the families of the crews who have been lost in this tragedy. And I have contact with President Clinton and other agencies. And he's giving good support for trying to find, investigate, see what was the reason.
The American president would answer his ally with a commitment.
And I spoke earlier with President Mubarak of Egypt today to express my condolences and assure him that we would be working together closely until this matter is resolved. We do not know what caused this tragedy.
In northern Indiana, music historian Jim Brokaw learned what happened to his father and stepmother.
One of the many things that I felt on that first horrible morning was the sense that people all over the world were confronting the same horrible circumstances that I was, and had the same sense of helplessness and disorientation that I did.
Shocked and grieving, relatives arrive at Newport, Rhode Island. They will seek answers and share comfort. There were 100 Americans, 89 Egyptians, 21 Canadians, and 7 victims of other nationalities on board. They're all asking, what caused this tragedy? Teams of investigators will pursue that question for years to come.
We are beginning what may be a long investigation, and we are prepared to do what it takes to find the answers to the questions we are seeking.
In Washington, Greg Phillips from the National Transportation Safety Board leads the investigation into this crash.
From the very beginning, we realized it was a very difficult case. The airplane was in cruise, nighttime, out over the ocean, and when it went into the ocean, there was just a little bit of floating debris, but we had to recover the airplane from the bottom of the ocean to begin the investigation.
The job of finding the black boxes would be difficult. The water is about 70 meters deep, and the tremendous force of the crash has smashed the locator beacons off the boxes.
In this case, both the underwater locators, which are called pingers, which help us locate the boxes underwater, were detached. So we had an extra difficult job in trying to find the actual boxes where the recording material was contained.
9 days after the crash, the US Navy's unmanned submarine Deep Drone recovers the first of the 2 black boxes, the flight data recorder, which stores information about what the aircraft and its systems were doing. 4 days later, the second black box, the cockpit voice recorder, lands on the deck and is carefully transported to the NTSB laboratories. The cockpit voice recorder captures all sounds in the cockpit for the last 30 minutes of the flight. The black boxes are protected to withstand impacts of 3,400 times the force of gravity. The recovery of the cockpit voice recorder provided a gripping and bewildering picture of the last minutes of a disaster. Here, investigators hope, is the key to unlock the mystery of Flight 990. Translating the Arabic spoken in the cockpit is a top priority at NTSB headquarters.
The cockpit voice recorder was good quality. It was easily usable and translatable by the investigation team. The cockpit voice recorder is always just a piece of the investigation that fits many other pieces of a puzzle. It goes along with the flight data, recorded data, examination of the wreckage, and all the other aspects of investigation.
On major investigations like the crash of EgyptAir 990, the NTSB works routinely with the FBI. The physical evidence has to be managed in case it's needed in court. Former FBI Assistant Director Lou Shaliro is a veteran investigator and no stranger to air crashes.
By the time EgyptAir occurred, we were fairly adept at looking at airline disasters, particularly with the view of developing whether or not a terrorist incident or a criminal act had occurred.
The FBI checked for evidence of bombs, terrorists, or terrorist targets on the flight.
Trying to determine luggage against the passenger list and whether or not there was anything unusual in the manifest, whether or not the people that loaded the plane could recall anything that would have caused them concern. We reviewed surveillance tapes to indicate whether or not anything unusual was loaded on that plane. We had no evidence at all of any explosive device on board EgyptAir that night.
At the NTSB, American investigators found no fault in the aircraft from studying the flight data recorder. But Egypt's members of the investigation team insisted that not all the evidence was in. Much of the wreckage was still in storage on Rhode Island. They hope the cause of the crash can be found here. Egypt's representatives search for any possible mechanical cause for the crash. While they search, other theories are pursued. A study into the causes of airline crashes published in January 2001 points to pilot error as the cause of 1/3 of these accidents. It also finds a strong connection between bad weather and pilot error. But the crash of EgyptAir 990 occurred in clear weather with veteran pilots. What happened in the cockpit would divide the investigation and fuel an international controversy. October 1999, EgyptAir Flight 990 crashes into the Atlantic Ocean, killing all 217 people on board. The investigation develops in two directions: fault in the airplane and pilot action. Rumors swirl about what or who may have caused this terrible crash. One of the key questions: why was the relief first officer in the cockpit hours earlier than expected? He was supposed to replace Adel Anwar much later in the flight. But in Cairo, Adel Anwar's older brother Tarak has no problem with Adel being replaced in the cockpit.
Suppose I am with one of my friends and we are traveling in a car and he asks me if he can drive instead of me. Is this going to be a problem? For example, if Adel didn't get enough sleep and Captain Jamil told him, "Let me fly the plane instead of you and you go rest," there is no problem with that.
When the actions in the cockpit are put together with the voices recorded, a timeline emerges that indicates a series of initially bewildering decisions.
I'll be back to you.
The timeline reveals that after Captain Al-Habashi leaves the cockpit, there's a series of sounds whose meaning can only be guessed at.
Control it.
And then the relief first officer disconnects the autopilot.
I rely on God.
Released from the autopilot's control, the plane starts to descend, rolling to the left. Egypt's experts described El-Batuti's decision to shut off the autopilot as a possible reaction to an unusual movement of the aircraft, prompting him to take manual control. However, the leader of the NTSB investigation disagrees.
We found no reason for the autopilot to be disconnected by a fault or failure in the airplane.
Normally, all aircraft movements are meant to keep passengers comfortable, as though they were on the ground. After switching off the autopilot, Batuti pushes his control column forward, lowering the elevator panels. So the flight data recorder indicates to the NTSB. Then he pulls the throttles back, reducing engine power. This causes the plane to dive. Egypt's investigators say Batuti was not trying to crash the plane, and there may have been an elevator failure which he could not overcome. Strangely, there is no discussion of a problem on the cockpit tape. When the captain made his way back to the cockpit, he asked the first officer what was going on and never received a response. As former director of aviation safety, Bernard Loeb oversaw all air crash investigations at the NTSB.
It is well understood that in a cockpit, a jet transport cockpit of virtually any airline in the world, when a captain comes in and asks a question, the first officer will respond. When the captain asked his questions, Batuti did not respond.
Fighting the dive, pulling his column back all the way, the captain cannot gain complete control of the elevator, so he tries the throttles to power out of the dive. He was unaware that seconds earlier the first officer had shut off the fuel to the engines. Egypt's experts say that Batuti may have been acting out of caution. The flight data show that a low oil pressure warning appeared. That can mean the engines have flamed out. The captain may have then ordered the fuel to the engines shut off as part of the procedure for restarting the engines.
Shut the engines! It's shut!
The NTSB consider this possible scenario as well.
The engines shut off on a two-engine airplane at night over the water. We couldn't understand any reason why any emergency could cause you to shut all the power off available to the airplane when you're heading away from the nearest airport.
Foremost among the Egyptian investigators' scenarios was a tragic elevator failure. In Washington, at the National Transportation Safety Board, analysis of the flight data recorder indicates that Captain Al-Habashi was pulling back on his column to make the plane climb, while First Officer Batuti appears to be pushing forward on his column, making the plane go down. Elevators work simply. Pull back on the column and the elevators go up, lifting the plane. Push forward and the elevator panels move down to make the plane descend. They work together, but in this case they're going in opposite directions. Egypt's experts argued that this crash could have been caused by a failure in the elevator assembly, producing an elevator hardover, a jam in the elevator controls which lock them in the down position, plunging the aircraft into an uncontrollable dive. They stated that First Officer Batuti was working to regain control of the elevators, and added that he and Captain Al-Habashi were working together. If there had been an elevator failure, it could explain the first officer's unusual performance in the cockpit.
Pull!
Supporting evidence is found when analyzing fragments of the wreckage in the hangar at Rhode Island. Here, investigators made a remarkable discovery: 3 unusually sheared rivets. These tiny parts play an important role in the Boeing 767 elevator assembly. Egypt's consulting experts determined that the scratches in the metal surfaces of these rivets showed that they were sheared off in 2 different directions. One direction could be attributed to the crash. The second could indicate that the break occurred before the crash, and so may have indicated a jam in the elevators. Egypt's experts drew this to the attention of the Federal Aviation Administration, America's civil aviation regulator. Alarmed by the potential risks, the FAA ordered all bell crank rivets to be inspected on every Boeing 767 in operation around the world. The inspections uncovered 136 sheared rivets, and 34 aircraft were grounded until the fault was fixed. The FAA said the problem could result in loss of controllability of the airplane. Egypt's investigators had uncovered a credible-sounding scenario, that the sheared rivets in the elevator assembly of the Boeing 767 indicated a jam that could have caused an elevator hardover that the pilots could not overcome. NTSB investigator Greg Phillips disagreed.
Those are by design for the Boeing 767. The controls can be split. They're designed that way in case one of the surfaces, the control surfaces, fails, so that whoever is still in control of the airplane or can control the airplane with a failed elevator.
Before he became an investigative writer, William Langewiesche was a commercial airline pilot. Flight 990's maneuvers are programmed into a flight simulator in order for Langewiesche to test a pilot's reactions.
To see an airplane going so wildly into a dive, to see the altimeters unwinding at that speed, to hear the horns and warning signals going off, is frightening.
Whatever the cause of the dive, Langewiesche tries a variety of responses to recover from it.
Finally, they asked me to wait at the extreme 15 seconds. To sit in a 767 or any airplane going out of control and do nothing for 15 seconds. 15 seconds is a long time. It's inconceivable. But I did it. And even at 15 seconds, even waiting 15 seconds, I was able, through no particular skill, really reacting almost as any student pilot would, to recover the airplane, recover from the dive, before the airplane exceeded its limits.
No Boeing 767 has suffered from an elevator hardover and dive before or since the crash. The aviation experts hired by Egypt developed a wide range of scenarios, citing a fault in the elevator assembly as a possible cause of the crash.
Based on the data, the information we have from the testing that was done as a group effort with all the best thinking everybody had at the time, we could not make this airplane do what it did with any of the failure scenarios that were presented to us.
While mechanical failure scenarios were exhausted and terrorism was excluded, the FBI continued to dig into the life of First Officer Gamil El-Batuti. Less than 3 weeks after the disaster, news media report that in the final moments before the crash, El-Batuti said, "I have made my decision. I put my faith in God," causing many to believe he might be an Islamic militant bent on destruction. But the translation was incorrect.
From our initial review of Batuti's background, he was a fairly religious person, but I don't think we had anything to determine that his religious beliefs were radical or beyond what would have been a normal religious person.
What had Batuti said? And what does it mean? Egyptian professor Amin Bonar teaches Arabic at Georgetown University in Washington.
Tawakkaltu means I depend, I rely, I trust, and Allah on, and Allah is God. Oh, tawakkaltu ala Allah, on God I rely, I depend in whatever I'm going to be embarking on. People use it when they start a trip, when they start driving, going back home, you say tawakkaltu ala Allah. When you have an exam, you begin by saying tawakkaltu ala Allah. It's a very positive phrase. So it's not the kind of phrase that anyone would be using before they commit a crime or before they commit suicide.
To say this common phrase once was normal, but El-Batuti repeated it 11 times.
What's happening?
I expect that Captain Batuti would say, there is a fire in the engines, something stopped, I can see something's hitting the plane, anything like that. But he go on endlessly saying, Tawakkaltu ala Allah. This is not logic.
For the El-Batuti family, their grief would be compounded by the need to defend their father's honor.
When he died, the one thing we had to reassure us was that he had died honorably. And now they're trying to take that away from us.
There is a lot of mechanical failures. Why you have only to say that it's a deliberate act, no mechanical, no weather, no mechanical, no weather. So why? Because he's an Egyptian pilot.
Chairman Jim Hall allowed that it could have been a criminal act rather than an accident. The investigation could end up in the hands of the FBI alone.
It is only prudent for the National Transportation Safety Board to consult with these experts and officials to fully evaluate this information prior to any final decision on whether the responsibility for this investigation should transfer to the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Egypt's President Hosni Mubarak, formerly commander of the Egyptian Air Force, had known Gamil el-Batuti, according to his nephew Walid. Mubarak asked President Bill Clinton to intercede to keep the crash from becoming an FBI matter. Since the crash, Walid el-Batuti, nephew of Gamil, has become the el-Batuti family spokesman.
You have to understand that the highest ranking in this country, which is the Egyptian president, was an Air Force pilot. And he was asked, and he says, according to my experience, it's in the tail unit. Something happened there. It's not suicide. It could be either a mechanical failure, a manufacturing failure, something.
In America, the FBI focuses on Gamil el-Batuti and the question of motive. The FBI would learn about the man in control of EgyptAir 990, interviewing colleagues and friends, discovering a dark side to Gamil el-Batuti. Investigating the cause of the crash of EgyptAir 990, the spotlight falls on the character and history of Relief First Officer Gamil el-Batuti.
He was 59 years old, approaching 60, had never risen above the rank of first officer. That may have caused him some animosity towards EgyptAir. Had some personal issues in his own life in terms of financial, some issues in terms of his family members being sick, needing medical attention.
They've used the daughter in the accusation as they said she was sick, and that's why maybe he committed suicide. Before we go to this, I will give you the reason. First, the doctors have already, on that particular flight, have already told them that your daughter is going positive with the medication and everything is going fine, and he was extremely happy. He was so excited to come back.
Gamil el-Batuti was bringing her medical records back that night, among other things.
Okay, he bought tires for his son, and an argument went on the phone between him and his son.
My father called me to come to the airport because he could not carry all 4 tires himself.
He says, listen, I carry your tires all the way from the States. You don't want to come and carry it from the airport? It's a very natural thing. A man is going to commit suicide. Why would he do this?
In New York, the FBI continued their investigation at the Hotel Pennsylvania, where EgyptAir had a block booking of about 50 rooms for their crews.
The investigation that the FBI was able to do as far as Batuti's background probably spanned a period of about a year or so, at least from the records that we were able to obtain and from the interviews we did at the various places that he stayed. So he did have, I think, a propensity to engage in behavior with some of the hotel people in terms of sexual misconduct.
Hey, pretty lady, where did you get to?
Which, you know, at the time really appeared to be totally out of the realm of what was normal for a person of that status to do.
A husband and father of 5, Gamil el-Batuti was notorious for leering at and bothering female guests and hotel staff.
Come to my room.
The FBI learned that 2 years before the crash, 2 young women reported that he called them on their hotel room phone, telling them to look out the window across the courtyard.
You have a good time too.
When they did, they saw el-Batuti exposing himself and reported the incident to hotel security. His provocative behavior would continue. A hotel maid told the FBI that the night before the crash of EgyptAir 990, el-Batuti had sexually harassed her again.
No, I want to talk to you because look, I give you $100 if you just come to my room.
I'm not here for that.
Oh, sure.
I'm here to work. Just leave me alone.
Nah, don't be like that.
When the maid reported the approach, Another addition was made to the hotel's record of sexual harassment of guests and staff by Batuti.
The allegation of the hotel, as far as they said, it happened way before, not one day before the flight. Not one day before the flight, as has been mentioned.
The hotel maid told the FBI the incident took place on October the 29th, 1999, the day before the flight. 3 months after the FBI began investigating Batuti, an EgyptAir flight landed in London. The plane's captain requested political asylum in the United Kingdom. He claimed to have information about the cause of the crash of EgyptAir 990, and he feared reprisals in Egypt. Captain Hamdi Taha was a colleague of Gamil Batuti, and he was walking away from his wife, his family, and his country. The FBI sent a special agent, and along with a British security officer, he interviewed Captain Taha.
Were you aware of Batuti displaying sexually inappropriate behavior?
Yes. This is very important. I heard it from pilots who I trust. Batuti got into trouble for sexual misbehavior in New York with maids and following women and so on. The airline tolerated this for a while, and they told him several times, maybe you can get away with this normally, but this is America. You represent our country. You cannot do these things.
Captain Taha's information was second-hand, but his description of Batuti meeting with the airline's chief pilot was intriguing.
Khatem Rushdie went to see Batuti the night they took Flight 990. They had a meeting in the hotel. He told him that what he had done could not be covered up, and something had to be done. The flight back to Cairo from New York would be his last flight.
We go back many years together. But this will be your last flight to the United States.
He would not be flying to America anymore. Batuti had just had these big privileges taken away from him, and he was humiliated. So, I think that what happened was this. He must have said to himself, if this is going to be my last flight, it will be Khatem Rushdie's last flight also.
Certainly within various corporations where people bring weapons into the office and attempt to take revenge against people that they feel have aggrieved them. Perhaps Batuti felt that EgyptAir had been the cause of some of his issues, and unfortunately in this case it was the kind of office that was flying at 33,000 feet.
The FBI provides Taha's interviews to the NTSB. Egyptian officials asked for another EgyptAir pilot to be interviewed. Mohammed Badrawi had known Batuti for 40 years. Interviewed at the NTSB, he described discussing with Captain Rushdie what to do about Batuti's behavior.
Do you know if Khatem Rushdie was aware of the situation with Batuti?
Well, of course he knew. But he pretended not to know, I think, because Khatem Rushdie is the chief pilot.
Badrawi confirms that Khatem Rushdie is upset about Batuti's harassment of women at the hotel. So Badrawi takes Rushdie's concerns to his old friend.
And if he didn't listen to you, what did you tell him was going to happen?
Nothing much, really. You see, he was on his way out. We don't normally touch people when they're approaching 60.
I know. I'm not saying that you are doing something wrong. They are saying that you're doing something wrong.
I know you are my friend.
We have a little patience, and then they're out.
Badrawi would ask Rushdie to be patient with his old friend, considering that Batuti only had 3 months to go before retirement.
We've been in the Air Force for 40 years. All he needs is a few more months.
Badrawi's interview confirmed that Rushdie did believe Batuti's behavior had to be dealt with, and he denied Taha's claim of a meeting between the two on the night of the crash. But Captain Taha was not done. He had another compelling story to add. In London, an Egyptian pilot has requested political asylum and is offering an insider's view of the most controversial tragedy in the history of EgyptAir. Captain Tahar revealed to the FBI how EgyptAir briefed its pilots about the crash.
When they had done the transcripts of the cockpit voice recorder, the EgyptAir Chief of Operations called all flight crew to a special meeting in Cairo and told us the facts. Just the facts. No commentary. No explanation of any technical problem. He did not say anything, but all we pilots realized that this was not an accident. And then he told us not to talk to anyone about it. Don't talk to your family. Don't talk on the phone. Don't talk to each other, he told us. All of us realized that Batuti had done this on purpose.
For the American families involved, this was a case of 216 murders and 1 suicide. In Egypt, big, close, extended families combine with a strong religious faith to deny that Egyptians commit suicide.
The story has many sides. It has to do with religion. It has to do with beliefs. It has to do with the culture. I think until today, still in the Egyptian culture, people don't believe that Muslims or that Egyptians or that people coming from that culture commit suicide.
Cultural differences were not the only impediments to this investigation.
One of the difficulties that we did have was that when we went over to Egypt and attempted to really get into his background, it became a very sensitive issue for the Egyptian government.
FBI efforts to learn about El Batuti's personal life and family relations would be stymied.
It became almost to the point where we were never really able to develop all the things that we needed to get at.
Finally, on March the 21st, 2002, after a nearly $10 million investigation over 2 years and 5 months, the NTSB publishes its report and determines that
the probable cause of the EgyptAir Flight 990 accident is the airplane's departure from normal cruise flight and subsequent impact with the Atlantic Ocean as a result of the Relief First Officer's flight control inputs.
The Egyptian Civil Aviation Authority responded angrily, and their response read in part,
"It is obvious that the NTSB has not done the type of professional accident investigation expected by the Egyptian government."
The NTSB's former director of aviation safety takes exception to the Egyptian view.
What was unprofessional was the insistence by the Egyptians, in the face of irrefutable evidence to anyone who knows anything about investigating airplane accidents and who knows anything about aerodynamics in airplanes, was the fact that this airplane was intentionally flown into the ocean. No scenario that the Egyptians came up with, or that we came up with, in which there were some sort of mechanical failure in the elevator control system would either match the flight profile or was a situation in which the airplane was not recoverable.
Like many of his countrymen, the loyal nephew cannot believe his uncle Gamil was a mass murderer.
This is a simple plane crash. It was put and made like this for no reason. It shows that it's a cover-up.
Greg Phillips takes pride in having thoroughly investigated every lead and every scenario.
When we sign on to be accident investigators, we do it with the idea that we're going to keep the next one from happening, not to cover up one that did because of whatever reason may be given to us. I've never known that to happen. I've never even known it to come close to happening.
There continue to be differing perspectives on the crash of EgyptAir Flight 990, and unanswered questions remain for broken and damaged families. For many of them, answers to how and why this plane crashed will forever be a painful mystery. Smoke fills a passenger plane 10 kilometers in the sky.
We're on Mayday. We're going down.
Electrical systems shut down as the smoke spreads. The crew tries desperately to land their stricken plane.
We're going to need an emergency landing. Put your head on your lap.
We're going to need 5 trucks. They're standing by for you.
What seemed like a small problem at first has become a life-or-death struggle for everyone on board Air Canada Flight 797. Early evening, June the 2nd, 1983. Supper time aboard Air Canada Flight 797. Captain Donald Cameron has been working for Air Canada for 17 years and has flown almost 5,000 hours on a DC-9. But it doesn't mean he gets to eat first.
How's your seafood? Nice?
Before he can dig in, his first officer, Claude Ouimet, will have to finish.
Good.
The jet is in the middle of a flight from Dallas, Texas to Montreal with a stopover in Toronto. The heavy cloud cover below hides some light showers, but at their cruising altitude of 10,000 meters, the view is clear and bright. The DC-9 is only half full today, with 41 passengers scattered throughout the plane.
Can I have some tea, please?
24-year-old Diane Fadley is an active member of the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation.
We have a number of different fundraising activities, and once a year they have a large conference, and at this time it happened to be in Toronto.
Raymond Chalifaux is 23 and recently married. An engineer, he's returning home from his first ever business trip.
It was a little bit frightening both for me and for my wife. I was supposed to be gone 4 or 5 days, so first time we were separated for a long period of time, so it was kind of insecure for me, yeah.
And a few rows further up sits a growing legend in the world of folk music. Stan Rogers is just 33, but his career is beginning to take off outside of his native Canada.
I think Stan's best-known songs celebrate ordinary people. The songs are really about ordinary people rising to the occasion and becoming heroes on their own.
Just before 7 o'clock, the plane is a little more than halfway to Toronto.
What was that? It's right there, I see it. Right there.
Yeah.
3 circuit breakers have popped out. Like fuses, they protect delicate electrical circuits on the plane from becoming overloaded.
Like a machine gun.
Yeah. Zap, zap, zap.
The 3 breakers are for the flushing motor in the toilet at the rear of the plane. Cameron decides to give them a few minutes before he tries to reset them again.
You know, sometimes it overworks and overeats, and then the breaker popped, and then it cools off, and then you push the breaker and everything is fine. So put the snag in the logbook, and that's it.
Someone must have pushed a rag down the toilet or something. Jammed it and it overheated.
Cameron thinks that something must be stopping the motor from working properly. But it's not an emergency. Toilets get blocked all the time. Several minutes pass as the plane continues on its way to Toronto. Flight attendants Laura Kayama and Judy Davidson are busy serving up dinner in the cabin. In the cockpit, it's Captain Cameron's turn for dinner. But first, he wants to reset the 3 circuit breakers. Without them, the toilet won't work. The rest of the flight could get uncomfortable for the passengers.
Pop says I push it.
He's given it more than 8 minutes. But whatever is wrong with the washroom, it isn't fixing itself. In the cabin, one of the passengers complains about a disturbing odor.
Yeah, that is a strange smell. Let me take a look.
Connie Kirsch, a Texan headed for a business meeting in Toronto, is seated at the back of the plane.
I had smelled a peculiar smell where I was sitting. And it struck me as odd. Actually, it was a wiry smell. It wasn't a smoke smell.
A wisp of smoke is leaking out of the washroom. The smoke and the acrid smell of burning plastic takes Davidson by surprise. This is much more than just a clogged toilet. Other passengers are beginning to notice the smoke and the suffocating smell.
Sergio, there's a problem in the washer. Judy says there's a fire.
Okay, I'll be right there.
Chief Flight Attendant Sergio Benetti is in charge of the cabin crew.
As a precaution, we're moving everyone to Rosa.
The smoke is noxious and overpowering. Benetti can't see any flames. He sprays the fire extinguisher into the tiny washroom, trying to coat every surface.
As soon as I saw that fire extinguisher, something went through my mind. There's definitely something wrong. The guy seemed to have the thing under control, so he's gonna do his job and things will be business as usual.
It's 2 minutes past 7, just 11 minutes since the circuit breakers first popped out. Laura Kayama brings Captain Cameron the disturbing news.
Excuse me, Captain. There's a fire in the washroom in the back. They just went back to go put it out.
You want me to go back?
Yeah, go.
A fire on board an aircraft is one of the worst situations any crew can face. The plane is some 10 kilometers high. What starts as a spark can turn deadly in a few short minutes. But at the moment, Cameron doesn't know how bad the situation is.
You got to remember, in 1983, people were allowed to smoke in the aircraft. And there had been a number of incidents of this sort of in the industry. So it really didn't alarm me that much.
Ouimet finds the situation is worse than he expected.
I didn't see any flames when I opened the door before, but I sprayed it really good with the fire extinguisher.
You think it was a cigarette in the garbage?
No, not really.
Okay.
Can't get back there. Smoke's too heavy. I think we'd better go down.
But Flight Attendant Sergio Benetti has a very different assessment of the situation.
You don't have to worry. I think the smoke's easing up.
It's a confusing moment for Captain Cameron.
Some components do fail from time to time that are not severe or serious enough to cause an emergency descent. That's a pretty serious thing.
When Ouimet and Benetti were at the back of the plane, the smoke seemed thick, but now it appears to be subsiding.
Okay, it's starting to clear now. But I'll go back and check if that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. Take these goggles. I'll leave my mask on. Go back wherever you can, but don't get yourself incapacitated.
No problem. No problem.
If it's just a broken toilet motor, Cameron can still make it to Toronto. But if it's more serious, he'll have to land immediately before the small inconvenience becomes a deadly problem. June the 2nd, 1983. Air Canada Flight 797 cruises through the early evening. The flight has taken an unsettling turn. Wisps of smoke are gathering at the back of the DC-9. An acrid smell is spreading through the cabin. The crew is growing concerned. They've already moved passengers towards the front of the jet, as far as possible from the creeping smoke. Captain Donald Cameron is waiting for an update from the back of the plane, when suddenly he's got a new problem. The master warning light is on. Electrical systems throughout the plane, including some in the cockpit, begin to fail.
The airplane basically lost all its sophisticated navigation and attitude information. So I was left very suddenly with, I think, 3 engine instruments per engine and 4 flight instruments, which were very primitive. They were what you might have flown a World War II bomber with.
With his electrical systems starting to shut down, Cameron calls the nearest ground control.
Memphis Center, this is Air Canada 797.
Air Canada 797, Indianapolis Center. Go ahead.
Yeah, we've got an electrical problem here. We may be off communication shortly. Stand by.
Co-pilot Claude Ouimet is at the back of the plane. The washroom door handle has become hot to the touch. He doesn't even risk opening it. Faced with a potential fire on board, the crew have no choice but to land their plane as soon as possible.
I don't like what's happening. I think we'd better go down. We're going to be making an emergency descent. Brief the cabin crew. Yes, sir.
As soon as the decision is made, another warning light goes on. They've just lost most of their emergency power.
We're talking about multiple failure here, and it's starting to be complicated. So we're going down, and obviously we have to land.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
A small problem has snowballed into an all-out emergency.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
This is Louisville Control, over.
Air Canada 797, we have a fire on board. We are going down.
Can you possibly make Cincinnati?
Roger that.
Cincinnati is 46 kilometers away. They can make it. Captain Cameron begins an initial descent to 1,500 meters. The crew has switched to emergency battery power, but many of the plane's instruments aren't functioning.
So all we had left was DC immer power, and that's only good for radios, basically.
It's not only instruments. Cameron finds that a critical piece of his plane isn't working properly. The horizontal stabilizer on the tail of his DC-9 is frozen. Cameron uses the part that's still working, the elevators, to make the plane dive. But like a car that's lost power steering, the aircraft resists. As Cameron pushes on the controls, they push back with a pressure equal to 20 kilograms.
The airplane became very heavy, and I took my total concentration to fly the airplane.
An acrid, bitter smoke is creeping forward from the back of the plane and seeping in from the seams in the fuselage ceiling. It hovers like a cloud over the passengers' heads.
Incredibly harsh smoke that was really irritating your throat. You had to take really, really small breath, otherwise you would choke.
I could see it rise. It was traveling along those luggage racks, you know, coming forward.
The smell of burning plastic fills the air. Dropping oxygen masks could make the situation worse.
I could have deployed the oxygen mask for the passengers, but it's forbidden. You're only allowed to use the oxygen mask in the case of a massive decompression or loss of cabin pressure, not for fire.
I was crying and scared. I wasn't hysterical. The gentleman sitting next to me explained to me that if I would not cry and if I could, you know, conserve my, not breathe so fast, that it would conserve the oxygen, would help us, and not to worry, that the flight attendants, they really know how to handle these sort of situations.
As the electrical malfunctions ripple through the plane, the PA system shuts down. Flight attendants struggle to shout directions, but it's getting more and more difficult to breathe. In 1983, it's not standard procedure to tell passengers how to open the emergency doors. But in this case, the two flight attendants are taking no chances.
The plane is possible.
As smoke begins entering the cockpit, the captain's situation is becoming critical. For the first time, we met talks to the Cincinnati airport.
Approach, Air Canada 797. We're on Mayday. We're going down.
Air Canada 797, Cincinnati approach. Plan runway 36 ILS. And the equipment has been alerted. Do you have time to give me the nature of the emergency?
We have a fire in the washroom. We're filling up with smoke right now.
Say, type of aircraft, number of people on board, and amount of fuel.
We'll copy that later. We don't have time.
Gregory Karam is the approach tower controller. He's the lifeline for the struggling jet. He can't see the plane on radar yet, but he knows it's in trouble.
There was really no mayhem whatsoever, no screaming, nothing at all. In fact, it was very quiet and calm. And again, I was terrified at that point.
Almost 13 minutes after 7, Karam catches sight of Flight 797 on his radar.
Air Canada 797, you are now fully identified. This will be a no-gyro radar approach for runway 27 left. Descend now to 3,500 feet. Your position is now 12 miles southeast of the airport.
The crew needs to be guided in from the ground. Struggling to see through the dense smoke, they could easily veer off course. Karam will talk them down, watching them every step of the way. In the cabin, the smoke and heat are becoming unbearable.
My thought was, well, we're gonna crash. They won't be able to identify myself because I didn't have my papers with me, so I stood up, I took my wallet in the compartment and put my jacket on so that they could identify my body.
I knew at that point, that's when I decided, or felt that I was not gonna make it because I felt I would never see my family again, and the situation just seemed very impossible.
Stan certainly had a sense of his own mortality, and he hated to fly. But the demand for Stan was growing, so he was flying more often. And he certainly had a sense that with so much traveling, his risk is elevated.
Where's the airport?
12 o'clock and 8 miles, Air Canada.
Okay, we're trying to locate it. We're going to need fire trucks.
They're standing by for you. Can you give me the number of people and amount of fuel?
We don't have time. Getting worse in here.
Understood, sir. Turn left now. You are 1/2 mile north of final approach.
Finally, the crew see the airport.
Okay, we have the airport.
The tower has you in sight. You need not acknowledge further transmission from the Air Canada 797. You are cleared to land. You are 4 miles from the airport. Good luck.
In a thick haze of smoke and soot, flight attendants Laura Kayama and Judy Davidson feel their way along the aisle, trying to reassure the passengers. They can't get past the 12th row. The smoke and the heat are overwhelming.
I was praying the whole time. Dear God, please help us land this plane. Please get this plane safely on the ground. Can't see, can't breathe, death absolutely crossed my mind, but hang in there, don't give up.
I've been married for less than a year and it's already over. So I started breathing as little as I could and start thinking seriously at my wife.
Fighting the reluctant controls, Captain Cameron's strength is being pushed to the limit.
797, the tower has you in sight.
Squinting through the smoke, the crew of Flight 797 land hard. At 20 minutes after 7, the Air Canada plane is on the ground. It's less than 30 minutes since the first sign of any trouble on board Flight 797.
When we touch the ground, I assume that we're safe now. Now let's get out of this airplane.
But inside the plane, the smoke isn't letting up. Passengers are undoing their seatbelts and trying desperately to escape.
I got up out of my seat, and I remember putting my hands up on someone's back, and it was like waiting in a line. And I knew that was one line. I didn't want to wait very long. So I turned around and went the other direction, not knowing I was actually heading towards the front of the plane.
Sergio Bonetti is the first one to the door. He helps gasping passengers escape. The cabin is pitch black and burning hot. In the cockpit, the crew quickly shuts the plane down. The first officer escapes through the emergency window. It's a 5-meter jump to the ground. Passengers have opened 3 of the overwing exits. But even with the doors open, the exits are all but invisible. The smoke is too thick.
I saw a light, and it was the door that had opened. Someone had opened the door. I realized what it was, ran to the door, and held my help. I just put my face out so I could breathe.
Passengers who have found the exits slide off the wing and stumble to safety. On the ground, Laura Kayama and Judy Davidson frantically move passengers away from the deadly plane. Fire rescue vehicles surround the plane. They douse the plane's exterior and the ground beneath with foam, fearing a fuel fire or worse, an explosion. Through the cockpit window, we can see Captain Cameron sitting in his seat looking dazed and slumped towards the wheel.
First thing that got my attention was to see Don's face in the window and realize that he was not completely conscious.
I couldn't get out of my seat. I'd start and I'd get my arse up in the air or like that, and I'd be pushed back by I have no idea, it was an invisible force, but it was probably smoke and fire.
Desperately trying to save the captain's life, tells firefighters to cover him with foam.
It was this soapy, ice-cold mixture that drenched me.
It works. Cameron stirs and climbs out through the cockpit window.
Stop! There he is! Don!
Barely 90 seconds have passed since the plane landed, when suddenly the whole interior of Flight 797 ignites. The flames roll through the cabin like a train. Captain Donald Cameron is the last person to get out of the plane alive.
We knew there were people in the airplane, unfortunately, at that point. That was finished.
The cabin fire breaks through the top of the fuselage. Black smoke can be seen for kilometers. Flight attendant Laura Kayama begins to count.
I will remember these words forever. She told us to line up so that she could count the survivors. If there were survivors, obviously they were dead.
Including the crew, there had been 46 people aboard the plane. But there aren't 46 people on the runway.
I really thought that if the pilot could land the plane, we would all get off. But I knew when I looked around, I didn't think we were all there.
The passengers who escaped the plane suffer from smoke inhalation and minor injuries, but most are not badly hurt.
It was almost like if you got off the plane, nothing was wrong. I mean, there was maybe a sprained ankle, maybe someone had a broken arm or something. You made it and you were completely fine, or you didn't make it.
The young man next to me that helped me with my breathing techniques didn't survive. That was a real tough blow, because I know, for one, I believe he played a big part in my survival.
I guess it was around midnight. I decided to call Air Canada. I said, I'm trying to find out if a friend of mine was on this flight in Cincinnati. And she said, are you a member of the family? I said, no, I'm just a close friend. And she said, do you know if his wife is alone? And I said, well, yes. And she said, well, she may need somebody with her.
Stan Rogers, the rising musical star, didn't make it off the plane.
Cincinnati ground. This is Captain of the Air Canada flight that's on fire here.
Captain Cameron radios Cincinnati ground control from an emergency vehicle near his plane. He has a sobering message.
It seems there are 23 people left on board the aircraft. Is there a scheduled carrier runs into here that could maybe give aid and shelter to our stranded passengers? It's pretty cold out here.
What began with a simple electrical problem has taken the lives of 23 people. What caused the deadly fire? What went so horribly wrong? The investigation will uncover the plane's troubling history. This DC-9 had another serious accident just a few years before. In June of 1983, a strange smell in the back of an Air Canada DC-9 quickly turned into an all-out emergency. For 15 minutes, passengers and crew struggled to deal with thick, toxic smoke as it rolled through the plane. Flight 797 made a remarkable landing, only to burst into flames 90 seconds later. "23 people didn't escape the plane. Now the burnt shell of the DC-9 sits on the runway at the Greater Cincinnati Airport. It's one of the most disturbing airplane disasters in years. Within the hour, investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board are on the scene. The first grim task of the investigators is to recover the bodies of the dead. 21 Canadians and 2 Americans. Many are burned beyond recognition. Almost all of the victims are found in the front half of the plane, between the wings and the cockpit. Some are still strapped into their seats. Others are found in the aisles. And even though all the passengers had been moved up earlier in the flight, 2 bodies are found near the rear, beyond the wings.
Because of the dense smoke in the cabin, the passengers couldn't see well enough to find the exits. And 2 passengers went beyond the overwing exits and succumbed to the environment.
Investigators take blood samples from the bodies. They find deadly levels of certain chemicals that were produced as the plane burned.
When we did toxicological studies, we were able to determine that there were some significant high levels of cyanide and fluoride in the blood, as well as carbon monoxide.
It's not known if the toxic fumes killed the passengers. All that's certain is that they were unable to escape before the flames tore through.
When I went on board, I was just struck by the acrid smell. It was kind of eerie because there was a lot of fire damage. A lot of the fuselage was burned. You know, the interior of the cabin was burned down to the tops of the seats.
With the bodies removed, investigators begin digging through the wreckage to try and find the cause of the fire. Among them are members of the FBI.
They were investigating to determine whether terrorism might have been a factor, so they were on scene right away looking at the aircraft to make that determination.
The FBI examines pieces of the plane's floor, samples of water from the washroom, even a plastic vial found on the floor.
The FBI became involved very early because of the possibility of a crime taking place takes precedent over a accident. They were looking for anything that would have to do with an incendiary device or small explosive device or anything that could be fused to start a fire. They determined that there was no evidence of any crime being committed. It was probably accidental ignition, and so they then left and NTSB took over the accident.
Having discounted the possibility that the fire was deliberately set, investigators consider the next obvious cause: a cigarette. When smoking on planes was still allowed, the most common source of fires in a washroom was the trash container. Investigators examined the trash container and find that the top is burned away, but the trash chute and the container behind and below the sink are intact. Inside the container are remnants of paper, scorched but not burned. The fire could not have started here. With the most obvious potential causes discounted, investigators begin to comb through the wreckage looking for what had started the fire. Studying the history of the plane, Hill uncovers some startling facts. In the year before the accident, 76 separate maintenance issues had been written up in the plane's logbook. All were dealt with, but still, it's an unusually high number of problems. The plane's troubled history didn't end there. 4 years earlier, the rear bulkhead had failed, causing an explosive decompression. The crew had to make an emergency landing.
It knocked out a lot of electrical cable and hydraulics and stuff like that, and the guy did a hell of a job bringing it back to Boston.
The plane was repaired and put back into service, but Hill focuses on the wires that had to be stitched together after the accident. A bad repair job could have been the cause of the fire.
There were wires that ran through there that had been cut, spliced back together.
Investigators study all the wire splices they can find on Flight 797 that weren't destroyed in the fire, but they find no evidence of arcing or short-circuiting. It's another dead end. Investigators turn their attention to the cockpit voice recorder and the popping circuit breakers.
What was that? It's right there, I see it.
Right there.
Yeah.
Like a machine gun. Yeah. Zap, zap, zap.
The circuit breakers trip as a precaution. When they begin to overheat, the circuit breakers turn off, cutting electrical current to the motor. It's a safety feature, so the motor won't cause a fire.
Pops as I push it.
Investigators need to know if the breakers were tripped by a fire that had already started, or was the motor itself the problem? The NTSB build a mock-up of the plane's washroom and force the flush motor to seize. They want to see if it could have started the fire. The seized motor reaches a temperature of 428 degrees Celsius. It's hot, but it's not hot enough to ignite parts of the washroom around the motor. As they listen to the cockpit voice recorder, investigators uncover a puzzling clue. 3 minutes before the circuit breakers popped, the recorder picked up another noise. It was the sound of electrical arcing, like static, repeated 8 times. The noises weren't audible to the crew. Hidden from view on any airplane is a river of wiring. Investigators focus on a cable coming from a generator below the washroom floor. Insulation had rubbed off 2 wires, making it possible for sparks to be produced, sparks that could start a fire.
There was evidence that there was some electrical arcing, but it could have occurred after the insulation had burned on those wires.
In spite of countless hours of investigation and numerous tests, in the end, the NTSB can't pinpoint the exact cause of the fire. There simply isn't enough evidence.
Just because of the vast amount of damage that was done in that concentrated area around the lavatory where the fire burnt for a long period of time and possibly destroyed any of the evidence of where the fire actually ignited.
Even if they'll never know the exact cause of the fire, investigators try to understand how it could cause so much damage. There had been heat and smoke, but no one had seen any flames until an explosion ripped through the jet.
When you have a fire that has incomplete combustion, when it has a lack of oxygen, they will produce combustible gases. Those gases then can collect, especially in the crown of an aircraft.
The fire had burned out of sight behind the washroom walls, and the smoke, hot gases and fumes intensified and spread inside the wall space from the washroom through to the cabin walls. Those spaces acted as a sort of chimney for the gases and smoke that the fire was creating. Although the fire remained concealed behind the walls and ceiling panels, the smoke and hot gases entered the cabin through every seam, gathering in the upper space in the cabin and pressing down on the passengers.
The inaccessible areas and the cabin area are all linked together through small cracks and crevices and small openings. The plane is one big pressure vessel with everything being the same, equilibrated to the same pressure. So smoke and gases in those areas would fairly quickly start to permeate into the passenger cabin.
When the doors were opened during the evacuation, an unlimited supply of oxygen was suddenly available to feed the fire. The more intense the heat, the more oxygen-hungry a fire becomes. The gas is ignited with the force of an explosion.
And once you have a flashover, you produce heat, toxic gases, and you burn up all the oxygen in the cabin, and it becomes non-survivable.
The technical part of the investigation is complete. But there are still a lot of questions about how the crew responded to the fire.
The first officer says it's starting to clear now, and at that point I reckon that the fire was under control.
Could they have done more to prevent the tragedy on board Flight 797? 1983, a washroom fire on an Air Canada DC-9 filled the plane's cabin with smoke. The crew struggled to land the plane, but a flash fire ripped through the jet moments after it came to a stop. 23 people were killed.
There was a fireman hollering at us. I think the quote was, "She could blow at any minute."
NTSB investigators are unable to definitively pinpoint the cause of the fire. But after reviewing all the information they have, they're ready to release their report. The report on the lethal fire aboard Air Canada Flight 797 is published a year after the accident. It's a landmark in aircraft safety, but it immediately makes for controversial headlines. The NTSB points out that the source of the smoke was never identified, either by the flight attendants or the first officer. The captain was never told, nor did he inquire as to the precise location and extent of the fire which had been reported to him.
And with that in mind, what type of fire did you believe that you had?
The bin fire.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday.
And the report asks a hypothetical question.
Canada 797, we have a fire on board. We are going down.
Can you possibly make Cincinnati?
Roger that.
If he'd begun to descend sooner, could the captain have landed at Standiford Field Airport in Louisville, Kentucky? It was a few minutes closer. The report and the media attention it gets are devastating to Captain Cameron and his crew. Soon after the report is released, there's an outcry among pilots in the industry. They resent its implied criticism of Flight 797's crew and the suggestion that they could have begun their descent 5 minutes sooner. Several months later, the Airline Pilots Association submits a petition that defends Cameron and the crew. It makes an impact. The NTSB release a revised report, including the petition by the Airline Pilots Association. In the petition, First Officer we met writes an impassioned defense of landing the plane where and when they did. The issue wasn't only the distance to the nearest airport, but the required rate of descent. As it was, the plane barely made the descent to the greater Cincinnati airport. Still, the National Transportation Safety Board's revised summary doesn't pull all its punches, pointing a finger at Captain Cameron. The report states that the time taken to evaluate the nature of the fire and to decide to initiate an emergency descent contributed to the severity of the accident. 20 years later, the statement still stings.
I'm glad they were all, the people that got off. I'm very sorry that the people that didn't get off, because we spent a lot of time and effort getting them there. That really bothered me. All I know is that I did the best I could.
Along with the comments on the performance of the crew, the NTSB recommends a host of safety improvements. Perhaps if the flight had been full, someone would have noticed the smell of smoke sooner. But what the washroom of Flight 797 could have used was a smoke detector. They weren't standard throughout the industry, but after Flight 797, attitudes and regulations changed. Even though flight attendants did receive some training in dealing with fires aboard a plane, it didn't go far enough. But what was more obvious, the flight attendants weren't properly equipped to attack fires. Without full-face masks and oxygen, they couldn't be expected to fight fire while holding their breath. In the years after Flight 797, attendants received better equipment and training. The cabin crew had also made split-second decisions that helped save lives. Moving passengers further up the plane and handing out wet towels minimized the effects of the toxic smoke. Their decision to tell passengers to open the emergency exits over the wings was not standard procedure, but it let some passengers escape more quickly and was eventually adopted as a routine practice. Finally, it became obvious from the location of some of the bodies that passengers died because of precious seconds lost trying to find the exits in the pitch dark. What would have made a difference? Track lighting on the floors and bumps along the overhead bins that identified the rows with emergency exits. Features that would eventually become standard.
As a direct result of 797, a number of rules were changed, including a more stringent test for seats, a heat release and smoke requirement for cabin interior panels, requirement for smoke detectors in lavatories, and halon fire extinguishers in the cabin.
We're going to be making emergency landing. Put your head on your lap. Stay in that position.
But the changes were too late for those who died on Flight 797, like the man sitting beside Connie Kirsch. Months after the crash, his wife tracked Connie down.
She said, I just understand my husband was the one that was next to you, and I just wanted to know how was he? What was his spirits? And I said, he was in great spirits. He's very nice. He let me sit next to him and explained to me how to breathe. That was really difficult, you know, and the guilt that I carried for a long time was difficult. But I'm past the guilt, but I guess when you go back to it and you think about it like this in detail, you're right back there.
Stan Rogers was another victim of Flight 797. He would never be able to fulfill the promise of his life and growing career.
I loved his generosity and his loyalty as a friend. As an artist, he was perhaps one of the best songwriters this country's ever produced, and it was really an incredible pleasure and honor to be working with him. He still gets lots and lots of airplay, and so his legend grows.
Sometime after the accident, 2 Air Canada employees show up at Diane Fatley's door in Dallas.
They brought my Bible. It's dark because it was burned and singed, but it's a paperback Bible, and it did not completely burn up. This is just a reminder to me that God was with me. And I believe He protected me, and you know, He was there with me.
Captain Cameron and his crew eventually received 6 separate awards for their heroic actions on Flight 797, including recognition from the Royal Canadian Air Force. But they're all still haunted by the nightmare.
You feel responsible, there's no question. You feel guilt, you're willing to give your license. You feel very, very small until you get all the facts together, and because it's a puzzle for you, you know, you're as much as a victim in this. You're not supposed to fly an airplane in that condition, you know, so you're as much as a victim as the passenger, and I think it becomes all of our problem, and we're all part of the solution.
It's just a shame we didn't get everybody off. It still bothers me.
In the dark of night, over the Red Sea, a pilot struggles to control his passenger jet. The plane seems to have a life of its own.
I heard a scream, a noise. After that, I didn't hear anything.
Mayday, Mayday.
The sands of Egypt hide thousands of years of history. Monuments to ancient civilizations dominate the landscape. But for sun-loving Europeans, Egypt is also a resort destination, where the most important sand is on the beach. The town of Sharm el-Sheikh is several hundred kilometers southeast of Cairo. Perched on the Red Sea, it's a natural destination for people looking for a little rest and relaxation.
Sharm el-Sheikh is quite popular with Europeans. But the reason is, where can you get very warm sea with a 5-hour flight? And you have the Red Sea, which is crystal clear, beautiful mountains. It's just extraordinary.
The city's popularity is growing. More than 4 million people a year use Sharm el-Sheikh's airport. In the early days of 2004, tourists aren't the only ones drawn to the local beaches. British Prime Minister Tony Blair is also in the region visiting Egyptian leader Hosni Mubarak. Just after 2 in the morning on January the 3rd, many vacationers are still out on the town. But 53-year-old Captain Kader Abdullah is just starting his day. He's renowned for his punctuality. A former officer in the Egyptian Air Force, Kader is now a highly respected captain with the charter company Flash Airlines.
He always liked to pack his own suitcase. He wouldn't let me do it for him. He always said, I would like to prepare my own things to make sure I don't forget anything. He was very precise on what he wanted and what he would take with him.
Captain Kader meets up with his 25-year-old first officer, Amr el-Shafi. Together, they'll fly out of Sharm el-Sheikh heading for Paris.
Good morning. Good morning, sir.
El-Shafi is young enough to be the captain's son. The early morning flight isn't for everyone. Pascal Mercier and his family are supposed to be on the Flash jet, but changed their plans.
I was booked on the Flash Island flight. When my agency told me that I had to wake up very early and then we had to change planes in Cairo, I said, this is really stupid. I mean, if my daughter was like 2 years old and the other ones were like 6 and 8. So really, I didn't feel comfortable about changing planes and so on.
For other tourists, the cheap tickets that Flash offers are worth the trouble of getting up early. France Toulier was able to bring his entire family to Egypt. They need the break.
My brother-in-law had just lost his father, so he brought his children, his mother, and his wife there just to have a good time. Not to see the sights or anything, just to have a good time. That's what Sharm el-Sheikh is known for.
C'est-à-dire que c'est vendu comme ça.
Fatima Hijaji is also heading back to Paris after a vacation in Sharm. The mother of 5 is flying alone. Before takeoff, she calls her nephew in France.
Hi.
I was asleep when she called. I didn't really want to get into a conversation with her. She was someone who called you for everything. She needed to be reassured. So, even though she had the 5 or 6 hour flight ahead of her, she just wanted to make sure that I would be there to pick her up at the airport.
In all, 148 passengers and crew settle into their seats aboard the jet. It's 5 a.m. In the cockpit, Ashraf Abdel Hamid is the 3rd member of the crew. He's training as a first officer, although he's worked for years piloting corporate jets.
Temperature 12, dew point 01.
None of the crew members are happy with the poor quality of the weather information they're getting from the local air traffic controller.
They didn't say sky clear, they said clouds and sky clear. How? The two are opposite.
Ask him about ceiling.
No ceiling and clouds and sky clear.
Maybe it's scattered.
Maybe he means scatter.
Good morning.
The captain is also frustrated that one of his instruments isn't working. Although the engineer agrees there's a problem, it's not serious enough to fix.
Especially electrical.
The men laugh it off at the expense of the first officer.
It's probably called by Ma, making a heavy landing.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Captain Kader and his entire crew, we welcome you on board Flash Airlines Boeing 737-300.
It's still hours before dawn when the plane lifts off. The Flash Airlines flight will head out over the Red Sea before turning towards Cairo. The jet climbs through a pitch-black night. Without a moon to light the scene, it's hard for the passengers to see much of anything outside their windows. In the cockpit, the simple turn over the Red Sea is taking a bizarre twist.
See what the aircraft just did?
Captain Kader doesn't like the way his plane is behaving.
Turning right, sir.
What?
Aircraft is turning right.
Turning right? How turning right?
The plane is supposed to be turning left on its way to Cairo. Instead, it's turning in the opposite direction. The captain tries to get his plane back on course, but his situation just gets worse. Knowing he's in trouble, the captain tells the first officer to engage the autopilot.
Autopilot! Autopilot!
But it doesn't work.
No autopilot, Commander!
The 737 is now flying almost completely on its side. The plane gains speed as it spirals towards the Red Sea. Just minutes after takeoff, the plane is out of control. Diving towards the water, it's traveling at more than 700 kilometers an hour. Everyone on board is running out of time. Just minutes after takeoff, an early morning flight has become a desperate battle for survival. A passenger jet filled with French families is plunging towards the Red Sea. Everyone on board can feel the tremendous speed and gut-wrenching turns. The enormous G-forces are making it difficult for Captain Kader Abdullah to fly the plane. Ashraf Abdel Hamid, the third member of the flight crew, tells the captain to slow the plane down.
Retard power! Retard power! Retard power!
The plane is traveling so fast it's threatening to tear itself apart. After flying almost upside down, the crew is finally beginning to bring their plane under control. Then they hear the ground proximity warning. They're getting dangerously close to the Red Sea. Pascal Mercier and his family are staying at a beachfront hotel.
My daughter woke up suddenly screaming like hell, screaming like if something happened. I didn't hear the crash, but maybe she did.
It's okay.
It's just before 5 in the morning, minutes after the plane took off from the airport. It's disappeared from local radar screens. By the time the sun rises, the crash site is found, but there's little for rescuers to do. The plane shattered on impact. A postcard is found saying simply, "I think this card will arrive after me." Pieces of debris litter the surface, but most of the plane has sunk beneath the waves. There are no survivors. All 148 people on board the plane are dead. Flight 604 was to land at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris in the morning. As family and friends wait, officials list the plane as delayed and then slowly break the news of the accident.
They ask me, "Are you waiting for someone from Sharm el-Sheikh?" You say, "Yes." Then they say, "Could you come with us? We are going to take you to a hotel. At the hotel, we'll explain it all to you."
It was very strange since we were greeted in an hotel and we passed people who were leaving happy because they were looking for the same information as us, but their families were not on the list.
They came with a paper in hand. "Here, yes, Madame Hijaji, Fatima. We apologize that you have to learn it this way, but she's dead."
Later, on his voicemail, Mohammed Hijaji hears Fatima's message sent during the flight.
I heard a scream, a noise. After that, I didn't hear anything.
Captain Kader's wife hears about the crash from her son.
My son called me from abroad and told me that he had heard there was an accident in Flash Airlines. I was in disbelief for a while until it became reality. It was a very big shock for me.
In resort hotels, workers check the empty rooms of those who were on Flight 604. But one of the rooms is occupied.
Mr. Mercy. This guy from the hotel, the hotel staff, began to cry. He was really shocked, happily shocked to see us. He thought we were in the flight with everybody else.
They're here.
In my hotel, 82 people were on that flight. 82 people. It was really, really strange. Really, really heavy. But we were really lucky.
There had been no Mayday call from the plane, no warning to air traffic control that something was wrong. With the plane crashing just minutes after it left the airport, there are immediate concerns that a bomb had brought the jet down.
The plane had just taken off, and it looked very strange why this accident happened so quickly after takeoff.
When investigators examined the plane's flight path, they discover it would have gone directly over the town where Egyptian leader Hosni Mubarak kept a vacation home. It's also close to the house where British Prime Minister Tony Blair and his family were staying. Blair and his family were supposed to leave from the same airport that day. Security around the Prime Minister is immediately heightened. 2 days after the crash, authorities receive a phone call. Terrorists from Yemen claim responsibility for the crash. They say it's a protest against a French law banning the Muslim headscarf, the hijab, in public schools. But in spite of the phone call and the rumors swirling around Egypt, investigators quickly rule out terrorism.
If you have a wreckage distributed on a very large area, that means the plane was disintegrating in the air, and due to an explosion, it would be disintegrating on a wide area. In this case, there was very, very few pieces, and all located in a very small area. So this indicated that the plane was intact and went into the water intact.
If it wasn't terrorism, what had ripped the plane from the sky so quickly? Investigators face an enormous challenge. The plane has sunk below the surface of the Red Sea. Divers have to fight off sharks that are drawn to the carnage. The rescue teams find few bodies intact. The aircraft and most of the 148 passengers and crew have sunk over 1,000 meters to the bottom of the Red Sea. The first task of investigators is to find the aircraft's flight data and cockpit voice recorders, the black boxes. If they survived the crash, they will now be on the seabed. But this part of the Red Sea has never been charted. With so many French tourists involved, the French government offers to help in any way it can.
The French immediately responded by sending a boat specially equipped with robots to search the bottom of the sea.
But the wreckage is too deep. The sub that the French boat has can't survive the enormous pressure at the bottom of the sea. The investigators desperately need another submarine. But they're running out of time. The black box transmits a radio signal, but the battery only lasts for 30 days. If investigators can't find it within a month, the mystery of Flight 604 may never be solved.
Getting to the black boxes before the time the pingers stopped transmitting was always a very worrisome aspect to all the investigation team. Everybody was working 24 hours, round the clock, to try to salvage these and try to locate them first.
While the recovery effort continues, family and friends of the victims begin to mourn those who died. They pressure investigators to solve the mystery.
It's the biggest air disaster involving French nationals, the biggest in the history of civil aviation.
American, French, and Egyptian experts join forces. While waiting for the plane's black boxes to be recovered, they also begin focusing on Flash Airlines itself. Flying just 2 planes, it was one of a number of low-cost charter companies that had been competing for customers in Europe. In the last 10 years, there had been a rapid expansion of budget airlines throughout this part of the world. Offering inexpensive, no-frills service, they fought for a piece of the holiday market. Seaside resorts like Sharm el-Sheikh were one of the many destinations they serve.
Now, one of the ways in which they provide this extremely cheap travel is by operating their airplanes 24 hours a day.
Operating on such tight schedules means the planes are flown constantly. Former Flash passengers step forward to complain about other flights. There are a lot of stories.
I was flying home after a vacation.
A year before the crash, while flying from Sharm el-Sheikh to Bologna, one passenger recalls seeing flames pouring from a Flash Airlines jet.
Hey! Hey! The engine's on fire! Look! Please!
The flaming aircraft is forced to make an emergency landing. Investigators learned that in 2002, the Swiss Aviation Authority performed a surprise inspection on the same plane that would later crash. The pilot's oxygen masks are missing. There aren't enough oxygen tanks. Some of the cockpit instruments aren't working. It's enough for the Swiss to ground the flight for 8 hours until the company repairs the plane. A few days later, Flash Airlines was banned from flying in Switzerland. Another ban occurred in Poland. In Norway, tour operators stopped contracting with Flash.
It's a rare event for an airline to be banned from operating into a country. They had to have done something dramatically wrong, especially when it comes to safety.
With mounting concerns about the safety record of Flash Airlines, investigators combed through the company's paperwork. They discover that the most recent maintenance records for the plane that crashed were never duplicated. They've gone missing with the aircraft.
The lack of having copies of the technical log and all of them being on board, of course, this is a violation. And civil aviation here issued very clear instructions that this should not happen.
The French authorities agree that there are serious questions about Flash. They now ban the company from flying in France. While there are concerns about the state of the company's planes, there are no such issues when it comes to the crew of Flight 604. Captain Kader was considered not only a flying ace, but a national war hero for his performance in the Yom Kippur War. During his career, he not only flew sophisticated fighter jets, but also a variety of large cargo aircraft. He had over 7,000 hours of flying experience, as well as 2,000 hours as a flight instructor. All the evidence shows that Captain Kader was a model pilot. With the aircraft and its black box data recorders still hidden deep under the Red Sea, investigators wonder, was this a case of a superb pilot fighting to save a decrepit plane?
See what the aircraft did?
On a moonless January night, a Flash Airlines 737 spiraled wildly into the Red Sea. All 148 people on board were killed. Investigators trying to find out why the plane went down have uncovered a history of safety problems with the airline. But trying to prove that there was anything wrong with the plane that crashed is difficult. Much of the wreckage has sunk deep beneath the waves. Investigators have been unable to find the flight's black boxes.
Whenever an airplane crashes into the water, there's always a fear by investigators that the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder may not be recovered. Those two boxes, in and of themselves, give the investigator a very good picture, and without them, could make the investigation process very, very difficult.
Finally, after several days of searching, a breakthrough. A French research ship hears the locator signals given off by the black boxes. A remotely operated sub drops down over 1,000 meters. The violence of the crash has spread the wreckage over a wide area. 2 weeks after the crash, both the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder are recovered from the bottom of the sea. Investigators finally have some hard evidence. The Egyptian, French, and American team examines the critical devices in Cairo. After the two black boxes are found, the salvage effort wraps up. Other than a select number of small pieces, the rest of the plane is too deep to recover. The cost to continue would be too great. Without the wreckage itself, investigators concentrate on what they do have. They hope the black boxes will recreate the final minutes of the doomed plane.
One of the things we did to depict the path of the aircraft was we created an animation based on the data we got from the flight data recorder and from radar.
The flight data recorder paints a devastating picture. Shortly after takeoff, the plane began heading left, just as it was supposed to. But then it quickly started banking in the other direction. The cockpit voice recorder shows that the turn caught the captain off guard.
Turning right, sir.
What? How turning right?
Analyzing the cockpit voice recorder, it showed that the pilots were experiencing definitely some kind of an abnormality, a problem that they could not understand.
The investigators sift through the flight data to find some explanation for the jet's bizarre movement. Perhaps some mechanical fault was forcing the plane off course. And there is an indication that something was wrong with the flash jet before it took off. On the runway, the captain and the ground engineer discussed an electrical malfunction. But it's impossible to tell from the cockpit voice recorder exactly what the problem was.
Especially electrical.
On n'a pas de certitude sur le dispositif. We can't be sure which equipment was being referred to by the aircraft captain and the engineer when they were discussing faulty equipment. Not enough parts were brought up from the bottom of the sea to be able to determine that.
Pour pouvoir dire.
And tragically, the ground engineer was also on the flight.
We believe from the data we are looking at in the flight data recorder that there is a very high possibility that the plane was tending to turn to the right by itself.
But what exactly had gone wrong? A thorough accident investigation can take years. But in the case of Flash Flight 604, there are unique challenges.
The problem with accident investigation is that it's very time-consuming and resource-intensive, especially when we don't have an airplane to physically look at. You want to be absolutely sure of the facts, conditions, and circumstances before you publish that information.
Family and friends of the victims are becoming more and more frustrated. As the months pass, they demand answers.
We were led to protest outside the Egyptian embassy because we had no news. 11 months after the disaster, we had no message, no information.
Shortly after the protest, Egyptian investigators release a factual report. It contains all of the information from the black boxes, but the report does not reach any conclusions about why the jet crashed.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening.
With a situation as complicated as this one, the investigators don't yet have any answers. The only thing they can do is to keep looking. Investigators discuss several possible scenarios that could have been responsible for the plane's erratic course.
You look into every hypothetical scenario that would create a similar profile. And then you see if this profile fit the data that you have put together.
50 different theories are examined in minute detail.
In the process of looking into all the possible hypothetical scenarios, we proceeded by eliminating those that did not fit the data.
Investigators travel to the United States to test the most likely ideas in a sophisticated simulator. If they can force the simulator to repeat the movements of the flash jet, they might be able to figure out why the plane crashed. The results are brought back to Cairo. There are only 4 mechanical faults that could have produced the flight path of the doomed jet. Investigators believe the key to the crash is to find out why the plane began turning off course.
These 4 scenarios were all related to what would cause an uncommanded bank. So we were left with these as causes that we could not rule out.
2 of the scenarios involved the spoilers on the plane's right wing. Spoilers lift up from the top surface of the wing, slowing it down. By producing drag or spoiling the airflow, they help turn the aircraft. If the pilot's control wheel or the cables that connect it to the spoiler jammed, it could have forced the plane off course. Problems with the spoilers are one explanation, but there's no physical proof. And while there were maintenance problems with flash planes, none of them had to do with the jet's spoilers. The team searches for another explanation. Another potential cause of the crash is the plane's ailerons. This part of a plane's wing controls the angle of a plane's turn. A malfunctioning aileron could have caused the plane to roll to the right. Again, if the crew couldn't fix the problem, the plane would have begun to spiral into the sea. While so-called aileron trim runaway would create a flight path like the one seen during the crash, once again, there's no physical proof to support the theory. And typically, aileron trim runaway can be physically overcome by pilots.
All he would have had to do was overpower using more force to move the control wheel in an opposite direction.
Overbanked.
When they listen to the cockpit voice recorder, the investigators are puzzled by the constant discussion of the plane's autopilot.
Autopilot.
The captain asked for the autopilot to be turned on, but it had no effect and the plane began to plummet to the sea. And earlier in the cockpit recording, investigators uncover another curious exchange. Captain Kader began the initial turn over the Red Sea manually, but decided to let the autopilot take over.
Autopilot?
The flight data recorder shows that the autopilot was indeed turned on as the plane climbed.
Not yet.
But then the captain appears to change his mind. The plane's flight data recorder shows that the autopilot was only activated for 3 seconds. But investigators wonder if the autopilot had malfunctioned and stayed in command of the jet. The automated system could have continued to control the plane, flying it to the right, even after the pilots thought it had been disengaged.
The malfunction of the autopilot, of course, took a lot of work from us because it was nearly impossible to show that it did not happen, and quite impossible to show that it did happen. So, but it was always a very prominent possibility because it would give a very, very close scenario to what was happening.
Perhaps most puzzling of all, though, is that no matter what happened to the plane, it appeared to be under control just before it crashed. Moments before impact, the captain was seemingly back in command of his airplane. If there had been some crippling mechanical problem, why did it seem to disappear? Some members of the team want to consider something besides mechanical fault: the pilots themselves.
I think the major concern for the United States was that the human factors elements of this accident weren't thoroughly explored.
Perhaps the high esteem given to Egyptian pilots was getting in the way.
In Egypt, pilots are very respected, and in particular, Air Force pilots are very highly regarded. For the past 26 years, the country's president has been a highly decorated Air Force officer. In an environment like this, the pilot is somewhat immune to suspicion. When something goes wrong, the natural tendency is to blame the equipment.
And on this flight, the pilot was a war hero with thousands of hours of experience. Studying the flight data recorders again, the investigators discover something peculiar. Even before the plane's bizarre turn to the right, 3 things all seem to happen at the same time. Instead of a smooth left turn, the plane begins to come out of its turn early. The nose starts to rise, and the plane's airspeed decreases noticeably. But during this time, the pilot says nothing. It seems that he's unaware of the changes to his flight path.
I've flown out of Sharm el-Sheikh at nighttime and in the same type of aircraft. And in no way should the pilot allow the airspeed to drop by as much as 30 knots, or the bank angle to change beyond 5 degrees without clearly stating the reasons for the change in the flight path.
Some investigators consider a provocative theory that might explain this seemingly bizarre behavior. Perhaps Captain Kader had been affected by vertigo.
Vertigo is a physiological condition that would exist with any person, not just pilots, and it's based on the inner ear. Over a dark ocean, without a defined visual horizon, no ground lights, the pilot may not be able to perceive visually whether he was flying up, down, left, or right. And if the fluid in his inner ear was moving or he tilted his head, that may induce a sensation, a physiological sensation, that may cause the pilot to believe the airplane is flying straight and level when it's actually turning.
The plane's flight path is ideal for creating a sense of vertigo. The Flash airline jet took off into a moonless night. Captain Kader was flying manually and began to turn as he was climbing. Heading out over dark water, it would be very difficult using just his senses for Captain Kader to know exactly where he was.
Roger, when ready, inshallah. Left turn to establish 306, Sharm VOR.
It is actually a very high workload situation, and when there are no visual cues outside because it's a moonless night and you're over featureless territory with no lights in it, you really, as a professional pilot, should be totally aware of the fact that this is a situation in which you could get disorientated. It's a classic. It's happened so many times. It's killed so many people in the last 10 years.
When the plane was supposed to be turning slowly left, the control wheel began inching towards the right. Perhaps the captain was making the turn without even being aware of it.
When you study the movement of the aircraft control surfaces, it appears as something was guiding Captain Cutter to the right. Now, that could have been a false horizon or something he's seen outside of his window.
See what the aircraft just did?
Or perhaps he believed he was actually correcting a problem with the plane itself.
He thinks he's gained his flight path again. And all of a sudden, at this moment, he receives contradictory information.
Turning right, sir.
What?
Aircraft is turning right.
The contradictory information adds to the pilot's confusion. He believes he's fixing a problem when he's told his problems have just started.
In this particular instance, not only are you trying to fly the airplane and understand situationally what's happening, but you're going through the mental gymnastics because your expectations are one way. Meanwhile, you have the first officer who's telling him something that's totally different.
Aircraft is turning right.
Egyptian investigators agree that Captain Kader may have suffered some form of disorientation during the flight. But they don't believe it was the only problem the crew was dealing with.
I don't really have a very clear indication that there was disorientation, but it's possible. There was a recovery from disorientation. The time to find out the problem and take the corrective action needed was more than the time left before impact.
No matter what role disorientation played in the crash, investigators are about to learn that the crew wasn't properly trained to deal with it. Flash Airlines never provided the pilots with basic information that could have saved their lives. It's been 2 years since an Egyptian charter plane smashed into the Red Sea. 148 people were killed. Investigators trying to figure out why Flash Airlines Flight 604 crashed face immense challenges. Most of the wreck is still deep underwater. By carefully examining the plane's black boxes, the investigators believe that disorientation may have played a role in the accident. The pitch-black night and the featureless sea caused the pilot to become confused about what was happening. But mechanical problems may also have plagued the plane. As they continue to try to solve the mystery, investigators make a startling discovery. Officials at Flash Airlines reveal that they hadn't provided the pilots with crew resource management training, although it was a requirement for the company. It might have helped the crew deal with their horrifying situation.
Crew resource management is a program where pilots are trained to work together rather than as individuals. Had the pilots of Flash Air 604 received a formal CRM training program, the outcome of this flight may have been substantially different.
American investigators believe the very junior first officer may have felt the plane was in trouble before the captain did, but failed to offer suggestions to his much more experienced co-worker.
What? Aircraft is turning right.
Nor did he attempt to take control of the plane.
Formal CRM training would have empowered the first officer who had the best situational awareness and the most information about the position of the airplane to take command of the airplane when he saw that the captain wasn't taking the appropriate corrective action.
An earlier conversation in the cockpit before takeoff may reveal why the young first officer would have been reluctant to challenge the captain.
Yesterday, we were coming in at dusk and the sun was 2-2. But I felt I could hardly see the runway. And he's already saying, in sight. What in sight?
Age, sir.
It may not have meant to be insulting, but it may have reinforced the first officer's feeling that he was the student and the captain was the teacher.
I am unable to raise my eyes, and he says, in sight. Where in sight?
It is going to serve as negative feedback. The young first officer is bound to hesitate. He doesn't want to be wrong again. He doesn't want to lose the respect of an Air Force general.
In a crew, an effort must be made to bring together people who are able to co-pilot, not a crew in which one person pilots and the other person looks on without saying a word.
But the captain and the co-pilot weren't alone in the cockpit. A third crew member with more experience than the first officer was also there.
Maybe it's scattered.
He too never said anything until the final seconds of the flight.
Otherwise, how will we know when we clear the cloud?
We hear him speak very clearly and very openly all during the time before the engine startup. He was in conversation with the first officer and with the captain. So this experienced person, being very quiet all through, we believe that if he saw any of the crew members doing something that he should not be doing, or not doing something that he should be doing, would have said something.
Retard power! Retard power!
The only word he said was, retard the throttles at the later stage of the event. Shows that that's the only thing he saw that should be done.
Even if the co-pilot had taken control sooner, there's no way to know if he could have saved the jet. Whatever took place on Flight 604 happened quickly. And since the plane had just taken off, the crew had little time to react before they crashed into the sea. The final report on the Flash Airlines crash was released in March 2006. There are no clear answers. Egyptian officials say that any of 4 mechanical problems could have caused the crash. They say disorientation may have played a role, but it's not the reason behind the accident. American investigators refuse to blame the plane. Instead, they say the problem lies with the airline, which didn't sufficiently train their crews.
The pilots are responding based on skills, abilities, knowledge, and what they got out of training. If the training was deficient, that's a company responsibility.
2 months after the crash, Flash Airlines went out of business. And as a result of the Flash 604 tragedy, new rules came into place to ensure that in the future, aircraft safety violations will be judged more harshly.
The Flash Airlines crash gave the final political impetus to a move to create a European blacklist where if one state banned an airline, then all the other European Union states would automatically ban that airline also.
The Egyptian investigation concluded with an important recommendation.
We have recommended that some kind of training or awareness program should be made to be able to have a pilot observe another being disoriented early and what he should do to first maintain a safe flight, second to pull the pilot from his disorientation back to orientation.
Was there a mechanical problem at the heart of the crash? Investigators will likely never know. With so much of the plane still at the bottom of the Red Sea, questions will always remain for investigators and everyone else who was affected by the crash.
I lost my nephews and my niece. They were just kids. What future would they have had? How can you put a price on that? What a waste.
The families will never be able to fully mourn, me included, because we'll never know what's really happened.